My name is James from Majetone. I wanted to chat about the upcoming instrument Kensal Clubdate. It is a drum library, 8 different stick options. I think it's pretty unique, and I'll get on to why that is. There's a bit of a story with this instrument, so if you'll indulge me, if you've got the time, I can tell you what it is. And I think it kind of ties together a lot of the things that I've been doing over the past decade or so. It sort of starts in 2013. I was working as an assistant in studios, sort of trying lots of different things alongside the kind of recording stuff, like the whole, what's that thing people call portfolio career. But yes, I was doing a lot of different things for people, making stuff, fixing things that I'd done, previously in jobs or as hobbies, and I've been making stuff really, since I was a kid. So it seemed kind of quite natural to sort of bring that into this side of things. So one of the producers I was working for, in fact, a couple of different ones, we'd had discussions about drum sound because I was obsessed with drum sound. I still am. And both of them were using calfskin heads. It sort of happened in the same week. It was like one of those sort of light bulb moments, and they sort of both said the same thing, that they didn't know anyone who could make them in the UK. Years previous to that, I had been sort of explained how to do it, that you soak the calfskin, then you tuck it round a hoop, and then you let it dry. And hey presto, you have a drum head. So I thought, well, I could give it a go. How hard could it be? Originally, the idea of the drum head thing was that I was going to reuse the hoops from old plastic heads, because drummers, you just end up with so many of these old plastic heads. I thought it'd be great to reuse them. More on that later. So anyway, got some calfskin off eBay, just a blank. Cut off a Remo Ambassador head, tucked it round with a spoon, and it worked. It made a drum head. And so, buoyed by that confidence, they asked if I would do this Ludwig Clubdate kit. So I thought, okay, right, yeah, I'll put the order in. Found a supplier and ordered a bunch of Vellum blanks. Then the question came back, well, how thick do you want them? I think us drummers over the years have been told that calfskin is really brittle and breaks really easily. And I actually think this was propaganda put out by, well, not propaganda, but marketing spiel put out by plastic head manufacturers. Because it isn't really, it's pretty hardy. You do have to play it a little bit differently, but it won't, I had in my mind that the minute you kind of rim shot on it, it would just explode, which is not the case. I thought, well, I'll get a bit thicker because I don't want to make these heads and then they break. Now, I know that I've said this is a unique drum library, and I know that everybody who makes a drum library probably says, oh, this is a totally unique drum library. I can almost guarantee it, because the thing that makes it unique is I totally screwed up in this and made it very difficult for myself. And in doing so, kind of created a pretty unique sound. I was unsure of how thick to order these, so I looked to Remo, and I looked at a Remo Ambassador. Now, obviously I'm from the UK, a metric based system, and Remo Imperial, and I didn't realise that the decimal of an inch is called a mil. I'd never heard it referred to as that, so I went on the Remo site and it says Remo Ambassador 10 mil thick. I think, oh, they mean millimetres. And then I started getting out my ruler. I'm thinking, that's very, very thick. That's pretty. They must be missing a decimal point or something. And I couldn't work it out. So I thought, well, I'll err on the side of caution, and I'll order these 0.6 of a millimetre thick and 0.8 for the bass drum. When they arrived, they were like cardboard, and just to give you some kind of context, this is quite a thick drum head. This is 0.4 of a millimetre, pretty thick, a little 10-inch. and then this is a blank. So this is 0.3, and you can see it's quite flexible, but when you wet it, it turns into like fabric. It's so soft and malleable. So yeah, I got this, and then so I got the the blanks of vellum, and I thought, oh, it will soften up as it gets wet. I didn't think anything of it. So went about it as I had done with the first head, cut the plastic off, used the is it still called a flesh hoop on plastic heads? I don't know. Whatever the hoop is called, used that on the 14, no problems at all. Got to the 12 and discovered that you can't use plastic heads to make vellum drum heads, because especially on older drums, they're quite a tight fit, even with plastic heads. And if you put vellum around that, they just don't fit. They just didn't fit. And one of the main questions I got when I was making the drum heads was, how did you end up doing this? Well, I think had I not done this kit, I never would have made another drum head if I'd just been making it for myself. But the truth of the matter was, I had already taken the money for them. I needed a certain amount of money, and it was a very slow month, and this came along and I was like, yep, perfect. That was one of the big questions that I used to get, of like, well, how did you end up doing this? Well, it was necessity in that moment of doing it, of persevering with it. So I had this 12-inch, and I was like, how am I going to do this? And I thought, well, the only way I can think to do it is to steam bend wood, and got myself some pine strip wood, did it in the bath with a kettle, pouring a kettle over it, and steam bent it round the shell, glued it, and it worked. Then I came to the bass drum, and I just couldn't tuck this head. It just was, you couldn't do it. It was like cardboard. It was so inflexible. And so what I did was I sort of formed it around the hoop and let it dry. It wasn't tucked, it was just kind of formed, and it worked. Because it was so thick, it gave off this real low end, and you didn't get any kind of transient to the sound, especially when you used a bass drum beater. It wasn't like a quote unquote normal bass drum. It was a real thud. I thought it was really interesting. And so sort of fast forward the year later, I was working in this studio now. The producer would kind of work in the week, and then at the weekends I'd kind of have time to kind of experiment with stuff, and I did loads of stuff in that time. It was really great. It was a really great foundation of just being able to kind of discover things and try stuff out. Like, so the Kensal kit that I released a few months ago, that was another one of those sort of days where I was sort of playing around with drum sound and trying to discover different things, or use different microphones, the characteristics of those. It was really wonderful. And then I sort of wanted to take that step further with this instrument. So I thought, right, I'm going to record something really big with this kit, because it's very special. It's the first kit that had my drum heads on it. If you look at the picture, I didn't have a stamp at that point. I don't think I even had the Majetone name. I wasn't intending it to be a company. Just people kept asking me to make them. Yeah, so I thought, right, I'm going to go all out. I'm going to use all of the microphones and really try and capture this kit. I also thought along the lines of how I approach things as a drummer, and I really love different textures on the kit, be that achieved with effects processing afterwards, of putting drums through pedals, or in the kind of performance and things. So I thought, well, I'll make a drum library that has a bunch of different sticks, because I really love different sticks and mallets, and every time I go to a drum shop, if there's something that I haven't got, I try and get it. There's 8 different kits and 8 different kind of playing styles or sticks used. So we've got the first kit. I use I use this, which is a Veta Sweet Ride. I really love this stick because it has a really nice barrel tip on it that I think sounds great on cymbals. So that's used on the first 2 kits. So you've got, the main Clubdate kit and the tea towel kit. The metal brush is this. This is a Regal tip brush, metal brush. really soft, gentle sound. With the brushes, I recorded them open and closed because I feel that that's a sound that is quite useful, but is kind of quite lacking. So they're just next to each other on the keyboard. So you've got kind of closed where you kind of play into the head, and then open where you kind of play off it. I thought that'd be quite useful. And then there's clockwise and anti-clockwise motion on the snare drum. I love the sound of brushes. So these are Regal tip whiskers, the nylon brushes. Bit more percussive sounding. Really great. So that's kit number 4. Kit number 5, mallets. Again, it's such a wonderful tonality on a kit, especially with the calf skin. It's such a dry tone. You don't get any of those sort of strange overtones that you get with plastic heads. So at low volume, it sounds really beautiful. Almost melodic. If you listen to some of the demos, you can almost sort of pick out kind of melodies in the toms, or at least maybe that's just me. So yeah, blue mallet. Then we've got a hot rod. They sound great on cymbals. So yeah, hot rods. Kit number 7 was a bit of a wild card. These are the unfortunately named Vickforth Dreadlocks. I don't use a great deal because they sound quite thin, but I thought in a sample instrument that could be quite useful because you can kind of layer it under stuff, but they're basically just kind of quite stiff brushes. Number 8 is a real favourite of mine. It's they're made by Promark. They're called broomsticks, and they're kind of halfway between a hot rod and a brush, so you get a little bit more transient with them. I use these like all the time for recording, like so often. Like these are a real, a gem of a stick. There's a bunch of different people who make them, but I think these broomsticks were the first. They're fantastic. So yeah, those are the kind of stick options. Alongside the kit, there's a few different kind of variations of things. So in most of the kits, there is a kind of detuned snare sound, an experimental head, where I tried to make a pinstripe version of a calfskin head. So I created a double ply vellum head by essentially gluing on another piece of vellum, and it just sounds like a sample. It really interestingly, actually, it works a whole lot better on pads because actually the physicality of playing the head, it was just really difficult to play because there's just no give to it whatsoever. So it's kind of like playing into like a quiche or something. Actually, that's much better on pads because you can kind of play off it or as a sample. And then there's snares off on the mallet instrument and on the broomstick. And so on key C1 and C sharp, you get a different bass drum. So D1 is the Ludwig Clubdate kick, and you'll hear that there's just like no transient, it's just kind of thud, which is great for layering under stuff. But C1 and C sharp, I wanted to include a kind of quote unquote normal bass drum. So it is a 23-inch marching drum that only had one head. So I get, again, 23 inch is a bit of an unusual size, but it's such a great sounding bass drum. And I played it in 2 different ways. So C1 is playing into the head, and C sharp 1 is playing off the head. So you kind of get a muted sustain with playing into the head. And then obviously playing off the head, you get more low end and kind of boom. It's a great sounding bass drum, really transient sounding bass drum. Yeah, so I know this is such a long video and we've kind of moved far beyond talking about just making sample instruments. Thank you very much for checking out the Kensal Clubdate. More stuff coming very soon.